See, wildlife crime is often viewed as a low risk, high reward.
It stops when the buying stops.
Two things, as you mentioned, balancing relief
Right.
and fiscal sustainability.
Obviously, the reduction will actually mean the impact to inflation is likely to be favourable.
Hello everyone, welcome back to yet another episode of Beyond the Headlines, the go-to space for the top stories that made the headlines and more. I'm Amalina Kamal.
And I'm Hasbin Hassan. Malaysia's inflation outlook is easing, with forecasts now pointing to a gentler cost environment. A major factor shaping this trend is the government's newly introduced Budi Madani RON95 Targeted Fuel Subsidy, or Budi 95, which comes into effect on September 30th.
And the scheme now allows eligible Malaysians, all but 60 million of them with valid driving licenses, to purchase RON95 petrol at RM1.99 per litre, capped at 300 litres a month, while non-citizens and large firms pay market rates of about RM2.60.
Yes, that's right. And economists say this broader eligibility framework cushions households against higher fuel costs and dampens inflationary pressures, keeping Malaysia among the countries with the lowest pump prices.
But the bigger questions to date are on how flexible the scheme is to be for high usage groups like P-hailing and e-hailing drivers, as well as how well the system can be monitored to ensure fairness and sustainability. All this to be discussed today together with our guest expert here. Of course, we've got Bank Muamalat Chief Economist Dr. Mohd Afzanizam Abdul Rashid. Doctor, welcome to Beyond the Headlines.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me today.
Pleasure to have you here on set again after a long time, Doctor. But before we get to you, I do want to just talk about a little bit about our last segment. In our second segment, we will be discussing and zeroing in on the recent arrest of 3 men in Johor for the poaching and killing of a Malayan tiger. Now, this definitely highlights the persistent threat posed by wildlife trafficking networks. Despite increased enforcement efforts such as the Khazanah Bersepadu, the Malayan tiger remains critically endangered, with 150 tigers left in the wild.
Yes, and this case highlights not only the brutality of poaching, but also the larger challenges tied to illegal wildlife trade, cross-border syndicates, and the demand that fuels this lucrative black market. Beyond enforcement, the issue raises questions about community awareness, governance, and whether our current systems are robust enough to truly protect Malaysia's biodiversity treasures. Of course, for now, it's back to you, Dr. Afzanizam. I want to first start off with inflation and relief here. With the inflation forecast now at just 1.5%, how much of this can be attributed to the cushioning effect of Budi 95?
Well, if you look at the composition of the consumer price index, RON95 accounted about 5%. Versus diesel is about 0.2%. That goes to show that the degree of consumptions of fuel is very much skewed towards RON95. But the government announced these measures with a revised subsidized prices, which is about RM1.99 as opposed to RM2.05. So obviously, the reduction will actually mean the impact to inflation is likely to be favourable. So I think that's the amount of reason why Bank Negara itself has actually revised down their forecast for inflation this year. Prior to this, it was around 2% to 3.5%. Now they are looking at between 1.5 to 2.5%, thereabouts. So the lower trajectory actually reflects perhaps among the things is the RON95 subsidy rationalizations.
I see.
But for if we look at it within, let's say, the next year in terms of the runway period, right? To what extent would this scheme actually help ease the burden of everyday Malaysians at least?
Okay, I think in the grand scheme of things, the way I see it, subsidy rationalization is always a work in progress. So now the government is targeting the non-Malaysians and big corporations, but for Malaysians, they are still enjoying the same amount of or better amount of subsidies. But going forward, I think the government will continue to relook at again, because I think they want to test the system of MyCard, how all this assistance will be delivered to the targeted groups. So I suppose if they have gained their economy of scale, now people are becomes more familiarized with the system. Going forward, perhaps the next target is to look at the income level. So I think it's a journey, but looking at how the government can help the citizen, measures like cash transfers, targeted subsidies are the one will be used for the immediate terms lah.
But in terms of monitoring systems itself, right, from past cases, do we know what sort of mechanics are supposed to be the best sort of practices to ensure that no leakages happen?
Well, obviously, it's through the enforcement of the existing ruling lah, and then to look and to make sure that government agencies under KPD and KK to actually mobilize their team and do their rounds and to check any negative business practices lah. And of course beyond that and to continuously to adjust the subsidies measures. Of course rooms for for any mishandling or abuse is always be there. But like I said, it's a work in progress. If I can share some past experience, when it comes to subsidy rationalizations, in 2008, I still remember the date, 5th of June 2008. That time we were using RON97. It was up by 78 cents at one go. So as a result, the inflation went up from just merely 3.8% in May 2008 to 8.5%. So we can see the impact is very severe. And of course, the intention is actually to remove the subsidies. But the manner is being done is very rapid, is very aggressive. So I think the government has learned this from the past history. So that's why I think going forward, the way I see it, the measures is going to be very measured, it's going to be very gradual. But at the same time to ensure that they will meet the objective.
Are you also with the opinion that RON95 cap will unlikely dent consumption? Because I do have a particular article here. It did say, an analyst did mention that it won't change much in terms of how people will consume RON95 on a daily basis. But a lot of people are saying that 300 litres per month is not enough. How should we as general Malaysians view this first?
Well, as in other policy making decisions, there's always a trade-off lah. And based on their data, what has been communicated based on their assessment, 150 litre per month is like their average, and perhaps 300 litres is something that is more than average. So I think based on that premise, the yardstick it seems to be makes sense. Of course, those who are travelling a lot, those for instance commuting from Seremban to KL every day, of course their fuel consumption is different. But perhaps the government needs to weigh the options and their affordability when it comes to subsidies.
Right. In essence, this is actually just another way or a form of tiered pricing, right? Or tiered consumption. In kind of like the same way the government does the new tariffs, the new electricity tariffs, right? So it's based on your consumption.
Right.
But instead of just capping it at 300, and like you said, the average consumption of RON95 petrol is around about 150 litres per month. So it implies that most of us actually don't go much more than that. But in the interest of actually keeping down leakages and making sure that only those who need the subsidies get it, shouldn't we just go all out on the tiered pricing or tiered consumption mechanism rather than just a general capping at 300 litres? Like
I said, I think it's a work in progress, and I suppose the government will continue to monitor the effectiveness of the current mechanism. And for me, the ideal solutions is actually to float the RON95, but of course we can't do that because it will shock the system. And I think that, like I said, we have seen in the past, during 2008, how it will impact the economy during that time. So the best way to do is to ensure that it's gradual, and more importantly, I think is to communicate to the general public why all this unpopular move is being done. Obviously, is to create more savings, and these savings will be channeled back to spending on education, on healthcare, on infrastructure. So all these narratives has to be put forward to the rakyat, to the citizens, Malaysian citizens, so they understand why is it important to enact this.
I mean, it's important to note how we can actually move forward by factoring the two things, as you mentioned, balancing relief and fiscal sustainability here, because otherwise we will probably be in more debt. But the government has also introduced like an 11 billion ringgit cushioning of RON95 subsidy during this transition. Is this significant enough? Like 11 billion is a lot of money, but to what extent will it help?
I think if you want to discuss about this issue, you need to look at from the big picture lah. I mean, subsidies is one of them, and beyond subsidies or expenditure, there's also tax policies, right? Recently, SST has been expanded in terms of the scope, and then if you look at the actual numbers now, let's look at the first half of this year. The fiscal deficits, this is the actual numbers, has actually reaching around 40.4 billion, which is equivalent to 4.2% of GDP. Last year, same period, first half of 2024, the fiscal deficit was around 51.5 billion, which is equivalent to 5.5% of GDP. So based on the first half number, we can see the trajectory of deficit is going down. And this is very much to do with, if you can recall, services tax rate was raised from 6% to 8% in March last year. 10th of June 2024, diesel subsidy rationalisation was enacted. So it's resulted in decline in subsidy expenditure and higher SST collections. SST collections for first half this year, I think growing at a rate of almost 30% jump.
Oh. Okay. Is that the first in Malaysian history in that sense?
No.
The jump, I mean.
The jump, it's very significant. So that goes to show the government moves to rationalize its subsidies, its tax policies, is working, and it creates the space, the fiscal space, which I think why it can explain the recent announcement of government to introduce across the board SARA. Right, every one of us can get 100 ringgit.
For a little kind of uptick in spending, like when the government gives out SARA aid for everyone. How important is that to the economy to make sure we can all spend and keep the economy going?
Right. It is important, because consumer spending accounted about 60% of our economy. So for every ringgit that we get in terms of income, typically we will spend it in the region of 60 cents lah.
Right.
The balance we save lah. So 60 cents, that's quite a major number, and it can drive the economy. At a time when we know the external sector is still wobbly because of tariff, so consumption obviously is the main driver or the main engine of growth for domestic demand. So it's very significant, and of course the issue here is how sustainable it is lah. So that's why I think the government needs to be very careful about rejuvenating the growth. Ideally, it should be something from that will based on productivity, that will a more quality kind of growth lah, rather than just one-off.
Presumably, that's the same thinking behind a more expanded coverage of the RON95 subsidy, right?
Right,
because it will create some savings lah. For the majority of us,
Just to highlight again, if it's not reiterated, because based on SARA itself, the government is expected to save an annual savings of about 2.5 billion to 4 billion just this year alone.
Right.
And that's a huge amount as well. I suppose, I'm not too sure if it's directly linked to the 11 billion that's set aside to cushion this transition period though.
Okay, prior to this announcement, I still can recall from the budget 2025 announcement last year, the allocation for STR and SARA this year is about 13 billion originally. Last year, the actual spending on STR and SARA was 10 billion. It's a big jump there. Yeah. And in fact, with additional 2 billion, effectively we are looking at 15 billion ringgit of allocation for STR and SARA. That's how important the fiscal consolidation exercise would actually result in the savings, which can be channeled back to the rakyat.
I think we're probably experiencing maybe a little bit of like uneasiness because it's supposed to be, you know, you're rationalizing things and you're trying to work for the better. And of course, you will see the storm first, but after the storm, then you will have that rainbow behind it, right? In that sense.
That's, I think the communication part is very important. I mean, these are all definitely is unpopular move. Raising taxes, cutting subsidies, never popular. But if the government can actually demonstrate, okay, these are the savings, and these savings is being channeled to building new classrooms, you know, new hospital, better equipment, better facilities. We can recruit more doctors, and the waiting time in hospital, public hospital, much lesser now. So if these tangible results can be communicated, I suppose there will be more buy-ins among rakyat, so they can understand why all these measures are being implemented.
But I guess the devil is in the detail, right, Doctor? For instance, like when it comes to this RON95 subsidy, it's really how the gas stations, the gas companies, the oil companies, these petrol companies are pushing out this RON95 to their consumers and making sure that the processes are foolproof so that no leakages happen. So how important is this messaging to be shared across right now?
To me, if I'm a petrol station operator, this is an opportunity actually to promote my products. I mean, using all this media, social media, and I've seen some operators have actually used it and explained how to use my card and everything. And I think more importantly is the customer experience, which I think very universal. Even at banks, we talk about customer centricity, customer experience. So in this regards, I think if they can demonstrate the customer experience bit, that could be their selling points as well, to make it more their whenever they come and fill up the vehicles with RON95 with a seamless experience. That could be I suppose can be what you call that, selling points lah. And perhaps they can add more whatever goodies and discounts and whatnot that can help boost up their sellability to the clients.
Sellability. Is that wrong though for all companies to be looking at this moment to jump on or is it they should be doing this because to better support the subsidy, the Budi 95, they should be taking the matter seriously?
Of course. I mean, the explanation part, how to use my card at their respective petrol stations is something that needs to be explained, obviously. But at the same time, it, like I said, it opens up an opportunity for them to showcase their so-called advantages when they, come and fill up their fuel with at their petrol stations. So to me, it's a kind of blessing in disguise in a way that opens up more doors for petrol station companies to do some promotions.
Okay, now we go into, let's say once like post September 30th, right? Once Budi 95 has been launched and this has been rolled out and factored in, let's say a couple of weeks of the nation, 16 million of them, to be acclimatizing to the mechanics of this subsidy move here. I just want to understand, in that process, what are some of the major considerations the government need to take into account when factor in consumers such as P-hailing, e-hailing drivers, those high volume sort of like users?
Well, I guess the MOF has already mentioned that the P-hailing, e-hailing drivers would be able to get more quotas, right? And then again, it's about their experience of getting those additional quotas. What sort of steps, is it just through apps, or just need to fill up some forms? So ideally, it has to be seamless lah. Because these people, they are really on the run and they need to make many rounds, and therefore the additional quotas is extremely important. And if you look at the I think during the tabling of gig employment REU recently, it did mention about 1.2 million gig workers, which I think presumably very much to do with P-hailing and e-hailing drivers. So this segment is very important. So I think it's critical for the government to ensure that the additional quotas can be delivered on time.
Yeah. No, that's one of the reasons why the gig workers bill was even passed to begin with, right? I mean, this community, this demographic that's out,
Yes.
the delivery riders, not just that, but the whole industry that it supports. Yeah.
Now, Doc, on just a broader long-term outlook on the economy, even our unsubsidized RON95 petrol is considered one of the cheapest, if not the cheapest in the world. And so when a reporter asked the second Finance Minister, Datuk Sri Amir Hamzah, whether the subsidized 199 price could be lowered even more, he said no, because that is the subsidized price and it's as low as it gets. Basically, he says even if global oil prices drop, it won't go lower than that. But I want to ask you, Doc, is it possible, though, for it to be cheaper than 199 from an economic standpoint? For whatever reason, if the government decided to subsidize it even further, can our RON95 actually be cheaper?
Well, I think the idea is to remove the subsidies gradually, and ideally perhaps we should do away with subsidies because we need this money to be spent on things that are more pressing, like education, healthcare and stuff.
Okay.
And also I think aside from to spend on things that are productive in the long run, there's also another consideration, which is the financial sector. The financial community, the investing community. That will mean that includes the credit rating agencies. Things like Moody's, S&P Global Ratings, and recently they have given us quite a good review. And so far, our government of Malaysia sovereign rating still maintained at single A- and single A3, with a stable outlook. So I think what the MK2 is trying to project is that they are very committed on financial discipline. That would mean a better review from the CRAs, credit rating agencies. Why is it so important? Because it will determine the flow of funds to our country. Because we are Malaysian economy in terms of financial markets are very open, be it in equities market or the bond market. If you look at the foreign ownership in Malaysian government securities, which is the main debt instrument for the government, it's about 33%. I mean, 1/3 of the ownership of MGS is actually owned by the foreigners. So it's important to demonstrate that the government is serious about fiscal consolidations. If not, the risk is that the credit rating agencies would actually downgrade our rating. This is what happened in the US recently. Moody's actually downgraded US AAA rating from AAA to AA. So we don't want that to happen to us. If that happens, then you can imagine these foreign investors would start to sell off their bonds, and you can imagine what will impact our ringgit.
Just curious, that particular rating that you just mentioned that happened in America, is it because of the sort of like knee-jerk policies that's been happening and the disconnect between like administrators, the executives as well as the industry players? Is it?
It was very much to do with their One Big Beautiful Bill Act. There was a massive tax reduction, 4.5 trillion, and it is being financed through a reduction in social spending, medic aid, and reduction in subsidies for clean energy. So that's the trigger why there was a downgrade.
Which spurred the feud between Elon Musk and Trump.
Yeah, exactly.
That was the point of
So it's revolved from a fiscal policy.
Yeah.
In US case, they want to make the tax cut measures permanent. It will cost them 4.5 trillion. Yeah.
Am I right in seeing how, okay, so lowering the subsidized price is really just not feasible, right?
Right.
And am I right in seeing this, that the government or the country has come full circle because we sort of put in place the necessary measures to collect revenue, extend the SST scope and all that. So in order to go beyond the 199 price, we're going to have to think of another way to bring up revenue, right? Which is obviously not going to be favorable. It's not going to be popular for any politician.
Right.
So is that what we're seeing here?
Yeah, I think that's the direction.
Okay.
One of the key tax measures that have been talked about, at least discussed among economists, is obvious GST. And even the Prime Minister, even MK2 also did acknowledge the effectiveness and efficiencies of the GST. But what they said is the economy requires some time to ensure that the income level will reach to a certain reasonable level that would allow them to reintroduce the GST. So based on that connotations, perhaps it's actually the government will find ways to improve their revenue streams.
Okay. I mean, with that, because we have like less than a minute and then we have to wrap up. But with that, because this RON95, if it is introduced prior to budget Belanjawan 2026, right? So is GST something to be considered or something economists are looking at to be presented? Or what are some of your hopes or maybe predictions here?
Oh, okay. Since the government has actually introduced subsidy rationalisation for RON95, that would mean more space for the government to spend on things like for development expenditure. So I would love to see more projects on the basic projects lah, like schools, jalan raya lah, that kind of thing, infrastructure. So that would actually spur the economic activities.
What about social security? And zeroing it further is the aging population here. Do we need to do we need to look into that, and to what extent does it contribute to our fiscal responsibility?
Actually, the aging population situation actually warrants for the government to really look at their fiscal position, because eventually, when we become an aged nations, you can imagine the tax collection will be lower, and therefore I think that's the reason why the government needs to rationalise their fiscal position so that they can spend more on things that will improve our productivity.
Do you think we could potentially become like Greece, like what happened to Greece back in the early 2010s?
Yeah, I mean that's the concerns. Yeah. But looking at the seriousness of the government, if you look at, we have already passed the Public Finance and Fiscal Responsibility Act, I think last year, and that goes to show the government's seriousness to at least to make it more official in terms of the targets like fiscal deficits, government debt. So that parameters, that guardrail would actually help to steer their monetary policies better.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Afzanizam, for your insights. Of course, I'm sure that we'll be referring back to you in the next 2 weeks when we hit Belanjawan 2026, when it's been presented by our own PMX, right? And to our audience, don't go anywhere. We'll be back with our second segment. Welcome back, everybody. Now, the Malayan tiger, a symbol of strength and pride for Malaysia, is now on the brink of extinction, with fewer than 150 left in the wild. Now, this week's shocking discovery in Johor, where a tiger carcass was found in a vehicle and 3 suspects were arrested, once again exposes the brutal reality of poaching and the illegal wildlife trade.
Yes, and despite tougher laws and joint operations, the threats persist, raising urgent questions about enforcement syndicates and whether we're doing enough to save this critically endangered species. Now, to unpack this bigger picture, we speak to anti-trafficking specialist and the Wildlife Trade Monitoring Network Communications Manager, Elizabeth John. Elizabeth, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Pleasure to have you.
Now, Elizabeth, of course, as we kick off this particular segment by addressing the fight against poaching, right? Well, the future of Malaysia's treasure is not just reliant on the Malayan tiger alone. We have other wildlife species that we need to think about. But for the sake of today's discussion, we zero in on the case in Johor and how it's like so casually being, discovered in someone's car. Like, to what extent is this actually normal in the Malaysian society? Trafficking and transporting wildlife carcasses.
It's sad to say this, but at the same time, it does happen quite frequently that tigers are found in, as ridiculous a situation as somebody's car boot. Once a tiger was found on the back of a motorbike that someone was driving, and he was stopped at a traffic stop, and that's how they found the tiger carcass in a bag at the back of his motorbike. Things like that are quite common. And if you look at the bigger wildlife poaching and all the species that are involved, it's big. It involves many, many different types of wildlife. And it happens fairly frequently, unfortunately.
I mean, the reason why I asked that question is because I just want to, again, emphasize on how this is actually not normal. Having to traffic wildlife, even though it's native to your country, is a crime, actually, to be honest. And with this particular arrest, not just in Johor, but with all the ops that has been done by enforcement officers, to what extent does it help in reducing or at least deterring away poachers here or those involved in the business, the trafficking level?
Okay, so trafficking is one of those things that, you just don't have a silver bullet for it. You don't have a one single answer. You have to do everything that you can, throw the whole kitchen sink at it. So enforcement is one aspect of it. Of course, the other big aspect is addressing demand. So the enforcement has to continue because there will always be people, no matter how much you campaign to them and how much you try to change their minds, there will still be people who see this as a business or who see this as a livelihood, and they're willing to take the risk. And oftentimes they get away with it, so they keep doing it. So that's the role of keeping enforcement at the forefront. But of course, at the same time, you have to do lots of other things to try and reduce the demand and to make this unattractive to people, and in many cases change the cultural perspective around the use of wildlife and make people aware of the laws and why they're there and why the wildlife needs to be protected.
Now, you're talking about demand here and trying to reduce it, right? And we were chatting a little bit earlier where I told you I just can't really bring myself around to thinking why I would want to pay as a consumer so much money for part of an animal, right? So perhaps you could share with our viewers, for the benefit of education here, what exactly these demands are that's fueling this this industry. And I believe you're so familiar with this, the tagline, it stops when the buying stops. But obviously it hasn't worked because we still have this problem.
Yeah, so there are a lot of things that drive demand. People see wildlife as something to use, something to take, either for food, for medicine, for exotic pets, for jewelry, trinkets, or collectibles, or luxury items. There's so many reasons why people want and use wildlife. And with the tiger, every single part of the tiger is used. And that is why the demand for it is so high. One of the biggest areas of demand comes for its bones, which is used in medicines. And then you have skins, which are used as trophy items or as, a show of prestige and power if you get to hang a tiger skin on the wall or have a tiger carpet on the floor. People want juvenile baby tigers to keep as pets. Anything else you can think of that, sits on a tiger, even a whisker, is in demand for, a purpose that, might not seem logical to you, but, there's someone out there in the world who wants it.
So it's both the demand for both tiger parts, dead tiger parts, and animals that are still
tigers,
alive.
Yes.
Right. So what's apart from tigers, what are the other sort of animals that you come across? High on the demand list here.
Well, again, it's anything you can think of that Malaysia has really, and I'm talking just about Malaysia. We have you have seen demand for all nature of mammals, a lot of reptiles, and one of the biggest areas that people don't really think about when they talk about wildlife, birds. There's a massive demand for wild birds, for songbird contests, an old tradition in Malaysia and much of Southeast Asia. And people have always kept songbirds, whether it's just for the song or to take part in contests. And that means a lot of birds are taken out of the wild. And I think many people either don't know or choose to look away from the law that protects a lot of these birds from being taken out of the wild. And so they are taken out in large numbers. Okay. And with things like reptiles, increasingly people are keeping reptiles as pets because, a cat or dog is not enough anymore.
Average.
Yeah, it's just average, nothing to show off. And in recent years, we've been even looking at things like tarantulas.
All the creepy crawlies.
Yeah. And
Anything that you can think of.
anything that you can think of, really. And all that is happening in Malaysia.
How big is the industry, this industry?
Well, because the illegal trade industry is, it's underground, it's difficult to value, and you will find many, many valuations out there. Some go up to about, $60-70 billion worldwide.
Wow.
And that's only based on what we know, what is seized and valued. The things that get past enforcement, you have no idea. So it could be much, much bigger than that.
And the demands come from, I'm not just trying to single out a particular, like continent or country, but we just want to know, just for feasibility's sake, the demands, do they come from the eastern part of the world, the western part of the world, Middle East, or is it a mix?
It's a big mix. It's everywhere. Malaysia, for instance, plays 3 roles. It is a source country for wildlife because we have so much. It is a transit country because things come in from other parts of the world to Malaysia and then go out again. And then we are growingly a consumer country.
Because of this luxurious sort of like for the gram lifestyle, or is it because of the health benefit, the medicine sort of needs there, the medicinal needs there?
It's all of it, actually.
Okay.
And also it is on the business side of things, where, money can be made smuggling in large volumes of ivory, pangolin scales, moving them across borders, and these are, $1 million deals and very lucrative. So there's that as well.
Right. To what extent then should we actually look at it as though like we're like the victims in this? I mean, as Malaysians, right? We're like our like Malayan tiger here. I mean, in this particular context, they are being trafficked out. We don't know where. But to what extent should we be looking at it from like an attack from the outside, but not from within, like how we view wildlife?
I would say actually it's an attack from within, because it's not just foreign poachers who are going after the tigers. As you can see with the recent case in Johor, it's 3 Malaysian nationals who were arrested. So the poaching is being done by locals as much as it is being done by foreign nationals. A lot of the collection and trading, the middlemen, the people who work at the ports and airports, and the smugglers who are getting things in and out of the country are also Malaysians. So, there was a time when it seemed like, we had a lot of foreign poachers coming into Malaysia looking for things like iconic animals like tigers. But when you actually look at the situation and the cases that come up, a lot of them actually involve Malaysians. So, it's something that Malaysians should really think about in terms of, what's happening in the country and how much more we have to do here to address the problem.
Is it because that in general there's just a really low level of awareness, one appreciating wildlife and recognizing that they're part of the ecosystem just as much as we are, and what do you think the government should improve to better that?
Just to add on that, because we want to highlight on how we can encourage community reporting, but it defeats the purpose when the crimes are actually done by the community itself. I don't know how to navigate around my earlier question, because sometimes internal reflection is hard to put out if you don't actually take accountable for certain situations that you might find yourself in, or if you're not directly impacted but you're within the same community or a same space, right?
In terms of reporting, right? So in this particular case that we are all focused on now in Johor, it came from a tip-off. Someone saw something and said something. And that is going to be key to us getting information from the source of where things are happening. We we can and should go and talk more to communities that live at the fringe of the forest. And I don't just mean orang asli. It's anyone who lives near a forest, and things happen, and everyone knows. These are usually small communities, tight-knit communities. Everybody knows what's happening, or somebody might have seen something. And as in this case in Johor, if not for a public tip-off, nobody would have known. And this, tiger in the boot, God knows where it would have ended up. So there is that possibility, and, we should look more into making the system easier for people, making them feel safe and protecting whistleblowers, and, of course, improving the rewards. But it is an important thing that people can do, and we all should, not just the government, we all should look at ways and means of enabling this.
Right.
Yeah.
Because just want to highlight there, I suppose because you did mention protecting whistleblowers. So do you think that's the single most important thing right now and most impactful thing right now for us as Malaysians to be looking into, in terms of like encouraging people to report is one thing, but the aftermath after reporting, the protecting whistleblowers, do you think that is an area that has yet to be further foolproof in that sense?
Well, I'm not, when it comes to whistleblowing, I'm not sure how the government agencies handle people who give them tip-offs, and what level of protections they offer. Certainly anonymity, because although this case has come to court and the men have been convicted, we don't have any information about who actually gave the information. So in that sense, the anonymity is there. But I really, I'm not familiar with the government system. But here's the other thing about encouraging people to speak. One problem that Malaysia really has to address for communities who live near the forest is human-wildlife conflict.
I see.
Because it's not just safety and security that people consider when they want to report or are thinking about reporting. It's also the daily problems that they have in life with wildlife. So if there is an elephant that is constantly coming into your village, or if this tiger has been wandering around your village and you live in fear, and somebody has taken it away, although by illegal means, by poaching, it's relief for you. So do you necessarily want to report it? And human-wildlife conflict is a massive issue in Malaysia right now. I'm sure you've read all the stories. So that is something, especially for communities living near forests, that government really has to work on and address.
So really, that is the underlying problem here, encroachment. And which is why earlier I asked, about the low level of awareness here, because people and you mentioned it just, aptly, saying that when these tigers, troublesome animals are taken away, it's seen as a win, right, for these people who are having to deal with the conflicts every day. So it's sort of ingrained on them that, animals, bad. Poachers come in, take them out, win for me. Why isn't the government doing more to set the record straight here? Hey, the real problem is encroachment. And on top of that, they should actually be helping these communities who live on the fringe, on the fringes of forests here, to not make encroachment a problem. But we're not seeing that, are we? Or not enough, at least.
Well, you have a bit of a situation here where a lot of the human-wildlife conflict, it's left to federal agencies to manage. But land is a state matter. And we do need to see more from state governments, more contributions from state governments in terms of making better decisions about how the land is open and used, better decisions for people and wildlife. You cannot expect to alienate a piece of land or remove the gazette from a forest reserve. Yeah. And, suddenly have a development and, expect the elephants and the tigers to find another place to live. That's in realistic terms, that's not going to happen.
Do you happen to know if the Wildlife Conservation Act also, governs individuals or at least groups that are not necessarily from the first-hand knowledge is like a poacher or a trafficker, but like say developer in this sense, right? If they're encroaching on certain areas that eventually will have an impact on the wildlife within the area, and having to contribute to the human wildlife conflict. Do you know whether or not our current Conservation Act covers these groups in terms of their actions?
Not particularly in that, not directed specifically at that, but the law does have clauses to cover things like encroaching into a forest reserve, so or protected area or wildlife sanctuary, but not specifically like you open this land and therefore cause this problem, and so I will charge you. No, that linkage.
Maybe that's the underlying issue as well, right?
Yeah,
because we still see this as an afterthought in that sense.
Yeah, but those kinds of things have to come from state, because state manages land, and it comes from making much better decisions for wildlife. When they're opening up land, that stops the problem from even getting off the ground.
That's right.
Right. So, we go back to the amount of the Malaysian tiger population here. It's like less than 150 now. Is that number new, or has it gone lower? Where are we at, and how concerning is that actually?
So that's the latest estimate that we have after the National Tiger Survey. And it's an estimate of 150 or less. And with every tiger poaching case that you see, that's just one tiger less in the wild. And it is very concerning because, there was a time when we boasted that we had, 300 wild tigers or even 500 wild tigers. And, historically at one time, the number was in the thousands.
We had 3,000 50 years ago, didn't we?
Yes, exactly. So, as you look back, you see the trajectory, and the trajectory is what is very, very worrying.
Yeah.
The number is not really stabilizing. It just keeps getting lower.
How much is this a threat to the food chain? How much is this a threat to the food chain? When as few as it is right now, fewer than 150, how does this affect the food chain?
So with the food chain question, it's actually very interesting. What's happening is that just as endangered as the tigers are the samba deers, which are the tiger's main food.
Yeah.
Because the poaching is not only for tigers, the poaching is also of samba deer and barking deer. So several years ago, government put a moratorium. They used to allow hunting of samba deer and barking deer with a license, but some years ago, they realized the number of samba and barking deer were really falling. And so they put a moratorium. They didn't give out any more licenses in the hopes that the numbers would come back. So the food chain has sort of gone all out of whack already, with the prey numbers falling.
Right.
And so, you do have a situation where, the tigers don't have their preferred prey. And in the last few years, we have seen also the African swine flu, which has affected the wild boar. So wild boar numbers have died off, have come down tremendously. And, with the wild boars, there's, of course, hope for them to recover from the disease. But, again, the tiger is at the top of the food chain, but it is already very impacted by, animals lower down the food chain. So it's a bit
Not only are they losing their habitat, they're losing their food.
Yes.
Sustenance.
Yes.
Maybe that's also, it could be a cause for the human-wildlife conflict itself, right? So there's no food or whatever, so they, go to the nearest sort of like civilization or like food areas.
But tigers don't typically attack humans, right? They don't. That's not naturally ingrained in their biology, right?
Well, it's not traffic's expertise, but from what we know, they are shy animals. They rather stay away from you than attack you. And in many cases, authorities have found that a tiger that is attacking cattle or humans, they have suffered some injury themselves, so they cannot run as fast, or they're not in a position to hunt as quickly and effectively as before, and therefore livestock becomes the next target, or people become next target.
Right.
So we covered on the issue of how many tigers are left and to what extent we value wildlife, to the current, I suppose, enforcement gaps that we have. And then now other wildlife that is, I mean, the numbers are dwindling. That's pretty unfortunate. But we want to look into how we can be better sort of like citizens in terms of how we can push for conservation, right? At the moment, yes, again, I'm highlighting about the Wildlife Conservation Act. To what extent do you think the measures under it is good enough in basic?
The Wildlife Conservation Act, which covers Peninsular Malaysia, is a very strong law.
Okay.
If you look at it and compare it to other Southeast Asian countries, it is very strong, and it has very, very heavy penalties. But the strength of a law or the effectiveness of a law really depends on the people who wield it. It's how you use it. And, the deterrent effect that you want from the law is not just determined by how much jail time you can give, but how much jail time and penalties and, other sort of penalties are given in the courts. How good the investigations are, how many charges are brought to court, and
stand in court, right?
And stand up in court, and also the way the judges view the crime, and the significance of the crime, and how they mete out penalties or punishments. Because, an example would be a couple of years ago in Temerloh, there was a young man who was caught with a juvenile dead tiger and two tiger skins, which also looked like they came from young tigers. And the Sessions Court judge found that it was a very, very, he saw it as a very grievous offense at a time when Malaysia only has 150 tigers. And he gave this young man 10 years in jail on 3 charges. Right? But when the case was appealed, of course, with 10 years jail, the offender appeals. And the judge in the higher court said that this young person should be given a chance at redemption. And 10 years was too much. And so he reduced it to 1 year for each of the 3 charges, so 3 years in effect. From
So
10
it's
to 3 years.
situations like this that actually is counterproductive to wildlife conservation itself. You put so much energy and effort in the first round. You create good awareness and in hopes that people actually do not participate in the industry. And if they do, we have really good, laws in place. But eventually, at the end of the day, if you can actually appeal and get a 1-year sentence, was the whole point, right?
It's putting out the wrong message, isn't it, out there?
Yeah, but this is the case is argued in court, and the judge makes a decision based on the evidence given, and also how they view the whole situation. But the other thing I would like to bring up is it's not just how much penalties you get at the end of the day. It's also creating a situation where your likelihood of getting caught is very high. See, wildlife crime is often viewed as a low-risk, high-reward crime, and that's why a lot of people do it. Until maybe last 5 or 10 years, you don't hear of so many people being caught. Now you hear people being caught all the time. Yeah. So hopefully that is what will really frighten people at the end of the day, if that's the effect we are looking for. Traffic is basically a monitoring organization. So we go out and look at what's happening, what the trends are, and with regards to tigers, we have produced a report every 3 years about global tiger seizures, and we've shown that the world loses 150 tigers every year on average. For the last 23 years, this has been happening. And, we are hoping that with this information about the number of tigers lost, the routes, the smuggling methods, the hotspots, that, this information is given to all governments around the world. And, this will help them make decisions about enforcement, about where to put the people, where to do the investigations. We also do a lot of work in bringing agencies together to talk about the problem and to address it. We also provide a lot of training and capacity building for people on the front lines, all the way from enforcement, investigating officers and raiding officers to prosecuting officers.
Because their participation is equally important as well, right?
Yes. So, everyone along the whole trade chain. And we also spend a lot of time talking to people in ports, airports, land borders, to sensitize them to these issues, because they have a full day's job. They are looking for bombs and guns and all kinds of
things,
contrabands, and wildlife is just one on the list. But because we spend so much time and energy and effort talking to them, and because they have responded, it's good, and that's how we are hoping to keep the issue in the headlines, on the agenda, and on top of everybody's minds, so that it can be addressed. Every officer you put in front of a scanning machine who is trained to look for wildlife, then the likelihood of a person being caught with wildlife in a bag is higher.
Right.
So that's how traffic works.
Yeah.
We've talked about retribution, and in some cases it might be putting out the wrong message. Nonetheless, that's just the courts at work, our courts at work. Apart from that, I wanna just get into the trade and the industry and how it has flourished. How dangerous are these syndicates? Are we talking about really large networks here? Because you have cases of poachers who are doing small jobs, perhaps operating alone, like the case in Johor. There were just 3 men. In fact, they were actually, they set up the snare for another animal, but a tiger unfortunately happened to walk in on it, and then they went with that. So beyond those cases, these large networks, how dangerous are they?
Okay, so when you talk about, if you're talking about physical danger, yes, that does happen, because you have a situation where Perhilitan caught a gang of elephant poachers 2 years in a row, and not only did they seize the phones showing dead elephants, and things like that, they also seized a whole lot of arms and bullets. And in one case, with one of the syndicates that were going around poaching elephants, C4. Explosives. So, you do have that physical threat, but the physical threat is largely unfortunately, to the enforcement officers who are, working on the ground and, going after these syndicates. The other way syndicates are dangerous is perhaps in a less physical way, because, this is a group of people or a network of people who are able to move large amounts of contraband across several international borders without being detected. And it's dangerous to the country in terms of if the item actually can be, you can collect tax on the item, say for instance timber, which is also considered wildlife. If you're smuggling timber, the country is losing so much money from levies. It impacts the country's finances. And then, you might have corruption in a system as you try and get it through ports and airports and land border crossings. Is there corruption in the system, and is there leakage of, money and revenue that way? And also it is dangerous because that, the system becomes entrenched, and, you can continue doing it for long periods of time, and it's these people work in the shadows. They're quite difficult to find, and the situation is dangerous in that way for the country.
Essentially like a black industry, right? A black market sort of industry. With anything happens, anything goes. If you're trafficking animals, what else can you traffic? Anything else. Anything's possible in that sense. It is a trans-border crime, as you mentioned. Yeah. And with that, I do want to thank you again, Elizabeth, for being here and sharing what you know, at least when it comes to the current predicament that Malaysia is in when it comes to wildlife conservation. Yes, I do agree. Community awareness, vigilance is important, prosecution and enforcement is important, but what's more important is curbing the demand and having to raise better awareness in terms of how we can actually create a space that's safe for our wildlife, right?
Exactly.
Thank you again, Elizabeth, for being on Beyond the Headlines.
Thank you for having me.
And to Hazwin, thank you as well.
Thank you for having me.
To our audience, yes, we have come to the end of our episode. Definitely, we will be speaking about this more, and we probably be bringing back traffic on set. But if you do like this particular episode, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Don't forget to also turn on the notification bell if you haven't already. You'll not only get Beyond the Headlines update, other NSC Online's news report will be delivered to you. And with that, I would like to say thank you so much to our guests again. And earlier on, Dr. Afzanizam. To our audience, we'll see you next week.